talk about salespeople, we generally think they're very good communicators. In fact, they're supposed to talk well. But when we are talking about communication, there are primarily three elements that go into a conversation to create an impact. Just as when we are writing, we tend to use different fonts to emphasize maybe we could use bold, maybe we could use differentiate in the size, maybe it could be in terms of highlights, in terms of colors. We could use various formats, various methods by which we emphasize. But while we are speaking the same conversation that we write it down, how do I make it more impactful? How do I make it more stressful on the subject which I wish to speak about? So as a salesperson, we need to be a very good communicator, and one of the most important elements in any good communication is all about how you use your voice. And when we are talking about voice, there was a research that was done about 10 years back, for about 10 years, span of 10 years, by a professor of the UCLA University. His name was Professor Mehrabian. He did a research, of course that was much before when we had this virtual conversations. It was all about one-to-one conversations. He did a research and he came out with three elements which created all the impact in a conversation. First was, of course, he said that 55% of most of a conversation to create impact is all about body language. And 38% was all about voice, how you use your voice. And 7% was all it took in words, though we emphasize more on words when you're having a conversation. But just remember, 38% is the impact of our voice in our conversation. And when we are talking about a telephone conversation, we don't have body language, we use words, and we have the voice. So therefore, we are using only 45% in a teleconversation to create an impact. So when we are talking about voice, what goes into the voice that creates an impact? And it's all about, if you look at a singer, their main asset is the voice. And how they control the voice creates the impact on the audience. Similarly, for a salesperson, because as a salesperson, we sell, as a human being, we'll sell to people. And the people are emotional, so how do we connect with the emotions? And voice is the main connect for our emotional connect with the audience. And when we are talking about voice, we are talking about 5 critical elements in that voice. We are talking about the 5 P's. Namely the power in terms of how convinced you are, how you want to stress, so the power. The second is the pace in which you have the conversation. Generally take the pace of the audience. And number 3 is all about pause. Because if we speak too fast, then we may not be listened to, we may not be heard. If you remember that there's an advertisement which goes on like mutual fund is subject to a conversation, something of that nature, which goes very fast. It doesn't create an impact. Therefore, we are talking about pause after we have said a certain thing for them to digest it. And the 4th element is all about the pitch. When you are angry, we take a different pitch. When you are sad, we take a different pitch. When each of our emotions has got a different pitch. And last but not the least, also the pronunciation, it creates an impact and linking with the conversation of the audience. Therefore, apart from these 5 elements, one of the critical elements is also about voice modulation. When we are talking about voice modulation, if we have the same tonality in our conversation, it's called a monotone. And monotone makes people go into sleep. It's like a lullaby, it's the same tone when you sing the song. But when we are having a conversation, you need to also emphasize, especially when you're telling them a story, how do we bring that whole enactment right in front of that person's eyes? It's all about connecting with the audience, and that is where modulation comes. Of course, the tone is very, very, very critical. So all these 6 elements which you're talking about in terms of the 5 P's and the modulation which you're talking about, all these ingredients account for the impact that we create through our voice on the audience. So when we are talking about voice, we are talking about connecting from empathy, from emotional perspective. So emotional connect is the most important connect with our audience. And that is, if we bring all this together, how the audience speaks, how we also align with the pace at which the person is making a conversation, the tone at which that person is speaking, all this results in a fruitful relationship and in the dynamics of sales to make it all happen. Thank you.